Many women just kind of want to disappear because they don't see themselves represented. I don't look like myself. I don't feel like myself. So it's easier to disappear. Well, maybe it's just time to see your new self. And who is this person now? Yeah, she looks different. You feel different, but that's okay.
Stephanie Odell is changing how women are seen, literally. She founded Celebrate the Gray, an agency that represents over 400 women over 50. But this isn't just about modeling. It's about helping women step back into the light at a time when the world often expects them to fade away. Stephanie's own story proves it's never too late to rewrite your path. She started her business later in life, and now she's built a movement that's helping women reclaim their confidence, their voice, and their place in the world. So if you've ever wondered if your best years are behind you, stay with us. This conversation might change the way you see yourself. And hey, if you want to hear more inspiring stories like Stephanie's, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Hi, Stephanie. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Hi, nice to see you.
You know, you've built something really powerful with Celebrate the Gray, not just as a business, but as a place for women over 50 to finally be seen. And from learning about you, this seems to have happened with a conversation in Trader Joe's. What was it about that moment where you thought, something has to change with the way we see women in their 50s and 60s?
Yeah, it was, those moments in your life that something happens and you can either pause and figure out, is that meant for something for me to really pay attention, or is it just a encounter? I met this woman in Trader Joe's, and she was probably in her 80s, and she had gray hair, but she had put pink or blue, I can't remember. And I had started this blog to talk to women over 50 called Celebrate the Gray, to figure out the real nuances or what really aging looked like for women. And I went up to her and I had a conversation, just, I love your look. And she's like, oh my God, thank you so much for saying something. And by the end of the conversation, she said, thank you so much. You made my day. And I had this kind of aha moment, like, oh my God, we don't see people as they age and they become invisible, and how little it takes to see someone. And I started thinking, what if advertising included us as we aged? Would we age differently? It was kind of this question that I had. So the blog, I talked to 100 women to figure out, what is the reality of that? Do women want to see themselves, or do they want to, what society is serving us, is that what we want? And I really found that it was not what we want. We want to be visible and vibrant and still viewed as an important part of society.
In talking to those 100 women, did you find something that they all kind of either experienced or had in common that made you think, oh, this is what's going on?
What I was most surprised about is how vibrant and full their lives were, because I asked friends to recommend people that really inspired them. And I realized that those women were not living by what society deemed appropriate, or what their capabilities were. And I thought to myself, if I saw these women in advertising and marketing, I would feel completely different about my aging. So I know other women would. So, and the whole, oh, they're unicorns, that's not how people really are. But the more people I spoke to, the more women I spoke to, I realized women were not buying into what society deemed appropriate. And they were living their lives how they wanted to. But there still were those women sitting on the sidelines saying, oh, I'm over 50, 60, 70, 80. This is what I'm supposed to do. And then you peel it back and kind of say, well, who's telling you that's what you're supposed to do? Like, where's that messaging coming from? Is that your own messaging, or is that society or your friends and family deeming to you what is appropriate?
Well, you, I guess, almost heard that yourself in having that conversation, because this wasn't necessarily your background, right? You had raised a family, you had done some other things. So you sort of stepped outside yourself a little bit to make this happen.
Absolutely. I mean, I was caught in the same thing, that I had raised my kids. I had stopped working to raise our kids. and really kind of have asked myself that question, what's next? And I had this idea in my head. I had started doing a part-time job styling and working for Athleta and Stitch Fix and had my own styling business. But it was, you know, something that I grew into feeling comfortable with. But then after doing this blog and talking to 100 women, I really felt like there was a need for an agency to address the visuals and narratives around aging. But I lived in imposter syndrome for a long time because kind of kept in my head, that little voice, who am I to think that I could do this? And again, the more conversations I had with people and the idea around it, people would say to me, "Thank you for trying to do something to change this." That kind of became my driving force. It's like instead of saying, "Who am I to do this? Why can't I do this?" It took a while, though. I mean, I definitely lived in the imposter syndrome. I didn't have the experience to open an agency. So I asked for a lot of help. I took small business classes, did what I needed to do to get that comfort level for myself to say, I think I can do this. And one of the most eye-opening experiences I had was through Instagram. I started reaching out to every gray-haired model I could find and asking her, this is what I'm thinking of doing. I had a conversation with somebody early on that said, don't look at others as competition, look at them as collaborators. So, there's space for everybody. So don't, hold on to your ideas and feel like, oh, someone's going to steal my idea, but more look at what can we do together? And that whole mind shift really changed how I asked for help and how I moved forward. And anytime someone helped me, it was just another thing in my mind saying, I want to help the next person that comes to me. So it became this very collaborative environment. And the women I reached out to were so giving with information of this is what I'm paid, this is what my contract looks like, this is what the age, they explained the whole world to me. It was before AI, so you couldn't just type in, how do you open a modeling agency? um, but it was super supportive. And still those women now that are still modeling, we are friends and they, constantly reach out, how's it going and what's happening? And, I see those women now in Target in campaigns, or I see them. There's one of the gals that's in a numerous TV ads. And so it's been a long process, but it really has been this really collaborative, supportive, lifting each other up kind of environment. And when you kind of give that energy to others, you get that back in return.
I'm so glad you said that because I think a lot of times when we're starting something new and we're taking some big steps, you feel very
Mm-hmm.
guarded. Like if I let other people in, like you said, they're going to take your idea. But what I've come to realize is that we are much stronger together.
Absolutely. And it's one of the things I think is my superpower is connection and connecting people. And, I remember someone early on said, how are you going to monetize this? And I said, even if I don't make any money and I just create an environment where women connect and help each other and celebrate each other, that will be pretty amazing. But I think when you find what you're good at and you really put out a genuine desire to help others, or your passion is genuine and comes from the heart, it's amazing what starts coming into your life because of that.
You mean like other
Yeah.
opportunities?
Yeah. And it's not easy to find. I think a lot of times we get caught up in this end zone, this end goal and this big dream. I remember I volunteered last week at a shelter, a clothing shelter kind of environment. I was talking to this young girl, and she had gotten a job there, and she wanted to get into fashion, but she said, but it's so what's the right word? She was so intimidated by, being a designer, or, I said, well, don't get caught up in that end goal. Like start doing small steps to, in the moment, what can I do right now that fills me up and I can learn from? And that will lead you to your next step. And when someone said to me, how are you going to monetize that? It shut me down because I was like, I don't know how I'm going to monetize it. And is that how you view success? And then I realized that's not how I view success. I view success as building this community, helping someone see themselves differently than that woman stepping outside of her comfort zone to maybe age differently. And then that she's inspiring someone else. So I realized the power of this collective or community and not getting so wrapped up in how am I going to make money?
Yeah, because I think those things come as you discover, like you said, what you're passionate about and what seems to be the right fit. I think when you force opportunities, it doesn't always work to your
Yeah, or
advantage.
you listen to someone else's idea of what success is and what they how they would build it. Like luckily I was so naive about building an agency that I did it my own way. I people would say, "Oh, you're bored," which is where all the models live and influencers, the pictures has to look like this. They have to be black and white and they have and I kind of like, "Well, I like it this way, so well I'm going to do it that way because I don't know any different." So ignorance can be a good thing sometimes by not knowing.
I
Yeah.
agree. Um, the women that you represent, they're not all professional models, though, are they?
No, many were models and younger in their 20s and have returned to it. But most of the women that come to me are just women that feel very positive about being a voice for change. I'll say to them, look, we're not in a position. I talk to everyone that reaches out to me and say, we're not in a position where this is a full-time opportunity. I'm hopeful that it will become more a full-time opportunity for people. But two things. One, you're going to be part of a collective of women that really understands the power of aging and wanting to be visible and vocal about who they are, what they're doing, and how old they are for those women sitting out there trying to think about aging differently. And two, to really, yes, there's opportunities through Celebrate the Gray, but really realizing how much power each woman has to change her own aging journey. And within each community, wherever that woman may be, there may be opportunities, but she has to be seeking them out for herself. And, most of the women will say, oh my gosh, I get told all the time, we started in gray hair because it's the first thing we're told as we age. You need to dye your hair if you want to be deemed beautiful in society. And 90% of the women will reach out and say, I get stopped all the time for my gray hair. How did you do it? Where did you get it dyed? And it's like, well, this is what God gave me. This is my natural hair color. And so that inspiration for other women. But that, a lot of women find me through Google searches or they'll hear me on a podcast like yours and just it gives them that small little permission to think, oh, what's next for me? Maybe there's something more for me than I didn't even realize.
Out of the women that you've met, is there a story that stands out to you?
Absolutely. There's numerous stories. One of my favorite stories is Grace, who lives in New York, who joined us a couple of years ago and has had a lot of opportunities, but she had no modeling experience. She's this fiery Latina woman that had gone through a very bitter divorce, started doing small jobs. We had a get together in New York, and it was her first thing that she kind of came to and ended up meeting 3 or 4 other women that lived in New York that were part of Celebrate the Gray. And they inspired her to join some of the online platforms that we're part of that you can find jobs through. And you just kind of saw this light start to turn back on for her. And she even vocalized to me that she was not feeling confident in herself as she was aging. And kind of the really amazing moment was a year ago. She reached out to me and said, I really want to do a photo shoot highlighting my scoliosis scar that I have on my back. She had scoliosis all her life, and she was ridiculed for it most of her life growing up. And then her partner also was not kind about some of the physical limitations she had because of it. And she said, I really want to turn that story around and I want to do a photo shoot highlighting it. So I helped her find a photographer and a stylist friend of mine joined us and a friend of ours that lives in this beautiful artist co-op. We were on the rooftop of that building doing the photo shoot. It was this intergenerational, one of the assistants was a young guy. And then there was a ballet studio that was on the roof, and there were all of these young girls that came out and watched. It was that moment of, I can't believe I built this, and we have given this woman this opportunity to really be seen differently. And she did it herself, though, and it wasn't an overnight change. It was this small progression of stepping outside her comfort zone, gaining confidence, taking another step even further. So that would be one of the stories that I just love thinking about and
That
telling.
is a good story. And so many times, we live our lives carrying, and I'm sure she always felt that that was somewhat of a burden to carry those scars and to have to almost hide from it. But it's what makes us who we are, and it is a beautiful
Exactly.
thing.
Yeah. I had another woman that we did this campaign with, Bloomers Intimates. It's an underwear line started by a mother-daughter team. The mother's in her 70s and the daughter's in her 40s. And four of the models did photo shoot. They did content themselves. So, but one of the models has a prosthetic leg, and she said, "Well, I'll hide that." And we were like, "Absolutely not. We should really showcase that, and talk about, show you as that's your whole being, and that is part of you, and that's part
Mhm.
of your story." Many of the women come to me and have they don't tell their whole story, and I said, it's so important to tell your whole story, because there's some woman sitting out there that looks like you and sounds like you, and your story is going to inspire her to think about aging differently, and be given permission to think about what's possible.
Do you feel like you've had to give yourself permission
Oh,
to do this?
absolutely. Yeah, when I started this, I had some friends kind of doubt my abilities, or maybe I perceived they doubted my abilities, probably more so than that, because
Mhm.
I was very doubtful that I was capable of doing it. So, back to really just doing what I felt confident in that moment, and that really built on the next. Um, it was funny, in the very beginning, I was on Instagram, and an Instagram Live came on. It was when people were just starting to do Instagram Lives, and I remember my kids were home, and I pushed some button. It was Stacey London. I don't know if you know who Stacey London is. She used to do What Not to Wear,
Yeah. Yes, I do.
and I was watching her live, and all of a sudden, I pushed some button that I didn't know I'd pushed, and it was to be in the live. And I was like, "Oh my god,
Oh.
what's happening?" I'm to my kids, "What's happening?" All of a sudden, I'm on screen with Stacy, and we start talking, and I tell her what, and this is in the beginning, and I tell her, "Yeah, I'm building this agency for women to be seen, change the visuals and narratives on aging for women." And she's like, "Oh my god, that is so," I got validation from her, and we become good friends now, because after the fact, then I DM'd her. It's being brave when it's that 20 seconds of bravery that can lead to amazing things.
And in that case, you couldn't
No, I
back
couldn't
out of
back out
that
of that
moment.
moment, and I was just like, "Oh my god, what's happening?" But then I followed it up and DM'd her. We ended up having a phone call. I ended up interviewing her numerous times. She has become an advocate for Celebrate the Gray. So you just never know where a conversation can lead.
Mhm.
I'm one of those people that will talk to anybody and everybody. Drives my family crazy, but you just never know, if you put yourself out there, that 20 seconds of bravery, where it can lead. And it may not lead anywhere, but gosh, what an opportunity if it does.
Well, you might not know that or it might feel like that to you that it didn't lead anywhere. But what if that person that you talked to it
Yeah,
gave them the confidence to take a next step that you're just not
absolutely.
aware of?
Yeah, you never know what impact you have for somebody. Even telling someone they look great, I think we lose that. Maybe because we don't feel confident as we age, and our bodies have changed, and we don't look like we used to look. And so we don't give that as generously as we might have. And I think women are hard on themselves and each other sometimes, but
Mhm.
how powerful that is to hear, because just to say, "Oh my God, I love your outfit. I love your shoes," whatever it may be. Oh, and I love Trader Joe's for that fact, because the people that work at Trader Joe's are so engaged and so thoughtful, and so they're doing a great job training, but I think we can do that for each other too.
Well, I have a funny Trader Joe's story, and I've told this before, but I went in there one day and I was not having a good day. And I think it might have showed on my face or something, but they're always so kind in the checkout line. And this young guy is working the register, and he's like, "So how's your day going?" And I'm like, not great. And he handed, they have the
Uh-huh.
little lollipops on the counter. And he's like, "I think you might need
Oh,
one of these." And I'm like, "Yes." So I do same. I love Trader Joe's because I always think of that moment and it
yeah.
always brightens my day. So,
I know. I was in there the other day and this woman was not having a great day. And was trying to get something and she kind of huffed and puffed at me because her cart was in the way. And then this other woman was trying to get something and she kind of huffed and puffed at this woman. And the woman and I looked at each other and we went, she must be having a bad day. And then when we checked out, I was in the parking lot and the woman that not the one that was having a bad day, but the other woman, she's like, "Oh, have a good day." And I thought, God, if we could just all be a little bit nicer to each other, wouldn't that be a fantastic thing?
yes,
And how little it takes to just say,
correct.
"Hey, oh, sorry, I'm in your way. Oh, thanks." So yeah, it can be powerful.
So, where do you want this to go? What do you want, brands to know about women and what they should expect from us at this stage of our
What I
lives?
want from this is brands to realize how valuable a consumer we are and that we don't aspire to be our younger selves. We really are quite proud of what we've achieved, and I would love to see that wisdom and experience be valued in many different areas, right? In workplace, in advertising, to allow us to really celebrate who we are now because we've done a lot of amazing things. I talk to women and they'll say, well, I really haven't done anything based on what society deems valuable, career wise maybe. But then I'll say, oh my God, you've done so much. It's that old adage, if we focus on what we have done, not what we haven't done, of how powerful that can be. And so I'd love to see brands really understand who we are, but that takes actually speaking to us. A lot of brands miss sitting down and talking to the consumer and finding out what they need and want, and instead decision makers perceiving what they think the reality is when in fact they don't
Mhm.
understand what our reality is. We're still athletes and travelers and people that want to learn, and they're just not understanding who we are, but it takes people
Mhm.
speaking to the consumer to understand. I talk about being on shoots and seeing that as we enter the shoot the first day, those decision makers not having a real understanding of the consumer and asking, are there any needs of the 70-year-old model? Does she need a walker? Does she need a cane? And I'll say, she's an ultra distance runner. No, she doesn't need any of those things. Um, but then they leave that shoot and they've met the model and they realize, oh, I don't have the right age model in my head. I need to update my understanding. So it's this opportunity for intergenerational education for younger people and older people. So I would love to see brands really understand who we are and represent us. But that also is a two-way street. It means we as consumers need to spend our dollars on brands that are actually seeing us and visually and
Mhm.
narratively representing us authentically. And our dollars speak volumes. Also, letting consumers know you're doing a great job. Dove is doing a great job. Target, I think, does a great job. There's numerous brands that are including older consumers in an authentic way. So letting brands know that, it's like giving someone a compliment. I think it also if brands knew, oh, they are paying attention and they do have dollars to spend and it does matter.
So, do you feel, in recent years that some of the brands are getting it? Because it seemed for a while that there would be like this really great campaign and they'd focus on women, as they aged, and there would be all these positive things. But then after it was over, there wasn't any
Yeah.
continuity to it. Do you think that that's getting better?
Um, no. I mean, I think there's some brands that are Target. I think, is doing a great job. They are always very inclusive in their advertising, their, commercials, in store. I mean, and then when you start paying attention, when you walk through the store, I encourage people to walk through the store and notice, oh, there is size inclusion, race inclusion, age inclusion. They do a good
Mhm.
job. But I do see a lot of those one-offs. Oh, we'll put an older person in a catalog or a campaign, but if there's not an immediate return on investment, then brands, oh, they're not our consumer. So the buy,
Right,
yeah,
right,
the
exactly.
buy-in is really a 2-year commitment, I always say, for the consumer to believe that you are seeing them and including them. And a one-off, just like you said, you can see the one-off.
Mhm.
So it really doesn't prove the brand to be credible for an older consumer. And the thing that's changed lately in the last 5 years, I'd say, we used to be very brand loyal, and that's started to change for the older consumer. And we're living longer and healthier, so we're a more vital consumer than we used to be. I mean, they used to think spending stopped really in the 60s, 50s even, but now, many people will live to their 90s. So you can gain a customer in their 50s or 60s and have them for 30 years. So there's a lot of changes that I don't think brands have caught up with yet. They still are doing a lot of aspirational marketing to younger consumers and older consumers with using younger models and thinking that's who we want to be.
And I think part of it too is that the generations that are out there right now, we're very used to
Mhm.
technology and using it and seeing it and being a part of it. So brands have to notice that we're out there because we're noticing when they're not.
100%. Yeah. Um, and the other flip of the technology side is the AI. Introduction of AI is really going to change things for the better in many categories. But I think brands are starting to use AI to create visuals and narratives based on information that's out there that's outdated. So unfortunately, it's going to perpetuate the outdated visuals and narratives because if that's all the information you use to create new, it's not going to be updated. So there's been a backlash about that for sure.
What do you
Yeah.
think it does to the consumer or to the woman out there who sees if it's clothing or a beauty product or travel or any of the other categories? When you see yourself represented, what do you think it does to your self-confidence?
Well, you can't be what you don't see. So if you don't see yourself, you don't think you belong in the clothes, in the restaurant, in the bar, at the university, whatever it may be. If you don't see yourself included, you don't think you belong. I did a fashion online during COVID, an online fashion show for Athleta, and I had many of the models, but I also did two things. We had older models that represented size, race, and age. And for women to see fashion on someone that looked like them gave them permission to go into that store when they didn't feel they belonged there. So it's this permission that's granted by seeing yourself. I think about, I still have a hard time going into the super high end stores. I know I don't have the dollars to buy a $6,000 dress. So why am I going in there? But I have every right to go in there. So it's the same thing. If you don't see an older woman represented in the advertising and you only see 20-year-olds in the clothing, you don't belong there. Those clothes aren't for me. But when you see it on someone that's older, it gives you that permission. One of the women that was on the Zoom for that actually reached out to me after and said, "Thank you so much. You gave me permission to go into that store. I always wanted to go in, but I didn't feel I belonged. But I could go in and I knew the 10 styles you showed on the women. I could go in because I know they looked great on those women and they could work for me." So seeing yourself gives you permission to think about those possibilities.
I never really thought about it that way before, but there have been so many times that I've been interested in a brand or a store and thought to myself, yeah, I don't think that's for me, but yeah, that makes sense. If I saw me, then you do
Yeah,
feel comfortable and you're more likely to
absolutely.
visit. and engage
Yeah.
with that
It's
brand.
interesting, the Land's End and the Eddie Bauer, which really is for the older consumer, they're doing the opposite.
Hmm.
Their brand, I think they feel like they already have that community and that customer, so they're using younger models, which is so interesting to me that they don't use the consumer. But then I'm kind of, as I'm saying this, I'm kind of saying the opposite of what I'm saying to those brands that only use young people that older people could use. They're not being inclusive, but
Yes.
in a backwards way, because that brand is really aimed. I mean, those clothes are more aimed at the older consumer.
Right. So they're already thinking,
Yep,
we have this market. We don't need to
right.
think about them anymore.
I love the brands that are doing intergenerational ads and showing younger and older women, because I find, I don't know if you talk to a lot of younger people, but I have a 24 and a 28-year-old, and I find those interactions so powerful. It's really two-way mentorship almost, of finding out what they're doing and learning from them, and them wanting to learn from me, of how powerful that would be to see mother daughters, aunts, daughters. I always kind of focus on women, but it's a very powerful statement to see generations represented.
I think it serves both the daughter, the mom, and I've noticed that a little bit more on social media, and I'm always drawn to those accounts where you see the maybe the like you said, the 20-year-old with her mother, and they're
Yeah,
wearing a similar style or dress, and you're like, oh, see, it
both
works.
ways.
It works for
Yeah,
both of them. They both look great.
yeah. I part of that.
And that's just a lot of
Yeah,
fun to
and
see.
it's inspiring to. One of the most powerful thing is to see those accounts where they take the outfit from the 20-year-old, and there was one account that used to do it. It was the daughter, the mother, and the grandmother, and they would take a piece of clothing and they would show it styled three different ways, and it worked.
And it worked. It's really kind of cool because if you don't see it, you don't
Exactly.
imagine it. We hear a lot about aging gracefully, but sometimes I feel like it's a polite way of saying, don't make too much noise or don't show up where you're not supposed to. But you like to use the phrase pro aging. Why do you think that little difference changes something for you?
Um, it's the whole be proactive versus reactive. Like, take control of your situation. Don't let somebody else control it for you. So I think and pro is more positive. It's interesting that graceful. We did a campaign with a swimwear brand, and they used the word modest in the narrative. And I said, don't assume someone wants to be modest because they're older. You can be modest at any age. So I think anytime you're given those kind of words that somebody is dictating how they view your aging should be, it's limiting. So pro aging is really being more positive and proactive in your aging.
Recently, and I don't know if you saw this, but
Oh
Bethany
yeah.
Frankel
Uh-huh.
did the Sports Illustrated swimsuit, and she talked. I found it really interesting because she talked about how, because the models ranged from all ages, and she just said we didn't all look like this when we got here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work that goes into getting these models on the runway, and I think for a lot of us, we see models represented this way and we think, well, that's an impossible demand. We're never going to be able to look that way at her age and walk a runway. But I think what we don't understand is it does take a lot of work, but that's also
Right.
not reality. There's such a small percentage of women that are going to be represented that way. But I think just her confidence in going out there and doing that was actually
Yeah.
kind of cool.
Well, I think too that this is one of the reasons that we represent a variety of sizes and races within Celebrate the Gray, because not everybody is going to be a size two, and
Hmm.
that has been deemed size two, tall, 6 foot, skinny, white, blonde woman has been deemed the ideal beauty long ago, but that was based on a 1950s model. So again, back to that, seeing women.
Was it Twiggy?
Yeah,
Was
what
that her
Twiggy
name?
was that, and then we went into more curves, but it's usually a decision maker sitting in an office deeming that's what beautiful is. So I think
Hmm.
redefining beauty and showing more women of different sizes, different races, different heights, really opens up that possibility of freedom for yourself.
Hmm.
And when Martha Stewart was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and people were up in arms because, oh, she's had all this work done and they airbrushed. Well, we know that, but she's also 80 years old on the cover of Sports Illustrated. That is a positive. Anytime that an older person is highlighted, that's a good thing. We're becoming more visible, and more. The more you see something, the more normalized it is. So that's the goal. The more we see people, the more we see gray hair, the more we see older women that aren't getting their faces fixed and smoothed out, and it starts to normalize it. And then it gives you that permission to say, oh, it's normal to look this way. I can just be positive in my aging and put myself out there and not start to dress in colors that make me
Hmm.
disappear. I'm going to start wearing color again. So seeing somebody is super important. And if we're not seeing it in advertising, then social media, really seeking people on social media that are doing it differently to give you that permission.
Well, you mentioned Martha Stewart and the fact that she's
Yep.
still working, she's still relevant, she still has a voice. That's what you
Right.
want to
And she works
see.
hard at that. I mean, it's not an easy that I don't want people to think, oh, it's easy to be seen. It's not. You have to work at it. But it can start by having a conversation with someone in a store, letting your friends and family know, I'm comfortable in this outfit. Don't tell me I'm too old to wear this. It's taking back your power. It's pro aging, taking your power back.
Speaking of colors, do you have favorite colors or things that you found yourself having the confidence to wear now that you might not have
Absolutely.
before?
Orange is my favorite color, and I have an orange suit that is my power suit. And I was doing styling, and I would work with older women, and it was really part of my journey was those older women saying to me, "The industry's forgotten me, and I feel invisible." And then I started looking at really their closets, and I looked at my mother who was in her 90s, and she was wearing a lot of gray and tan and just kind of colors. You think about winter and spring, which makes you happier, and the colors that are abundant in spring versus winter. And many women just kind of want to disappear because they don't see themselves represented. So they feel it's easier. I don't look like myself. I don't feel like myself. So it's easier to disappear. Well, maybe it's just time to see your new self. And who is this person now? Yeah, she looks different. You feel different, but that's okay. And I'll encourage women just get a red tennis shoe. And they'll wear that red tennis shoe with a pair of jeans and a white shirt. And somebody will say, "Oh my God, I love your shoes." All of a sudden, you have this confidence to say, "I think I'm going to wear a red top tomorrow." And then, you just start to get joy and you get more confidence. Once you have more confidence and you're more comfortable in your clothing and your body, because our bodies change for sure. It starts to give you this permission to age differently. And it may be external or internal. It may be, I don't have the skills to do a job. Well, I can go back to school. I can do an online course. I can volunteer. And those little changes, either internally or externally, are this catalyst for embracing where you're at now versus who you were.
And there is so much opportunity, I think, with the the way we use technology and the way we are able to learn and figure things out. I could figure things out now that you might have been embarrassed
Right.
asking somebody before, but now you're like, I could do it
Yeah,
myself. I can just Google it. I'll figure it
exactly.
out.
And there's a lot more freedom. I think that as we age, we also lose that. Um, we have more confidence, and we kind of the I don't really care what you think attitude comes into play, and you just kind of start living for yourself and not for everybody else.
Because everybody else is
Yeah.
doing their thing and you're being left behind if you don't do something
Yeah.
for
But you're so
yourself
right.
and get that orange
Exactly. You're
suit.
so right about the ease of learning now. And there's really no excuse. It used to be, oh, I can't go back to school because I'll be the oldest person on campus or in the class. Well, you can do online and you can start gaining confidence in small steps that maybe will give you that confidence to go back to school on campus because you've taken these classes and you have this new
Hmm.
confidence.
Before we, leave here today, can you tell us a little bit more about Celebrate the Gray? And is there something that you're working on that we don't know about? Or where can we find out more about you and just support what it is that
Oh,
you're
thanks for
doing?
asking. Celebrate the Gray is a collective of women across the nation, and we are working together to change the visuals and narratives on aging. I started representing gray haired women who wanted to be models or wanted to be the voice of change. And we now have also added influencers and content creators because brands during COVID, there was an opportunity to do photo shoots. And then now, past COVID and economy changing, there's not really the money to do photo shoots. And really, what I was hearing from brands is we want to include her, the older woman, but we can't afford to do photo shoots and we can't find content. So we've created also influencer and content creators that brands can work with to get photos, using skincare. So it's
Hmm.
affordable. So, and also then creating a revenue stream for the women that are part of the collective. It may not be a on-set photo shoot. It may be getting product, trying product and creating content or being part of a focus group. So really listening to what the needs of brands are and then also thinking about what the skill set of the women that are part of the collective. We have over 400 women that are part of the collective. What are their skill sets and how can we create opportunity for them to use what their skill set, or how can we connect other women together that have skill sets? Someone may join us that has never modeled, doesn't have an Instagram, just wants to be part of something. And she meets another woman that has an Instagram that is doing content and gets inspired to learn how to do that. So I always say you can join on a spectrum. You can be on a spectrum of where you're at and get exposed to other things and learn. And then we have just a private Facebook group for those women that don't want to model, don't really want to do the content creation, but just want to be part of the conversation. And they can be part of that. We also have built a stock photography site that we are creating content for brands to use. So constantly listening and talking to the end user and finding out what do you need, how can we fulfill that, and what are the skills of the collective to help fulfill that. So that I'm just continuing to do that, trying to find opportunities with brands and get brands to step up and really engage with us in an authentic way.
I just want to say, thank you for making a place where women can feel good about themselves and be seen. Yeah, hopefully brands will begin to catch on and listen. They're missing a lot of
Yes,
opportunity here.
absolutely. Well, thank you. And I also want to encourage women to realize how much power they have, one in their own aging journey and also in being a consumer and being vocal and visible about
Hmm.
what they need and want, because what they need and want is important and needs to be heard.
I agree. Well, again, thank you so much for
It's
being
great
here
to see you,
today.
Holly. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us on Real Wisdom. If you're inspired by stories like this and want to be part of a community that celebrates the wisdom of women, visit joinimpart.com and become a part of our conversation. And don't forget to subscribe for even more real wisdom. Until next time, keep embracing your story.